Chapter 26. I'll be in Jerusalem before you. When Nicole phoned Dr. Duclos and his wife to tell them the good news of the next day's meeting, they insisted upon taking her to the airport. It's too much for you to drive out there alone with the baby. Her objections were brushed aside. It's all settled. We'll pick you up at 6:30 tomorrow morning. It was just before 8 o'clock when they pulled up in front of Orly International Airport's South Terminal. Nicole got out of the car holding little Ari and looked around. "We'll stay right here as long as we have to," Dr. Duclos called after her. Nicole had only a vague recollection of Roger as a very tall Texan, but she was certain that he would know her. Nervously, she walked back and forth near the car. 10 minutes passed. Could she have been deceived? Suddenly, a tall man of about 50 burst out of a doorway and came directly toward her. "Nicole?" he asked in an agitated voice, and when she nodded, he immediately shot at her. "Where have you been?" "You said 8 o'clock, and I got here just before." "They couldn't wait. They've already taken him through security." He seemed to notice for the first time the bundle she was carrying. "You can't take the baby." "Why not? This is Ari's son. He's never seen him." "Impossible. Is someone with you?" "In the car over there," said Nicole. "Please, are you a human being?" Roger had already grabbed her arm and was steering her toward the parked vehicle. A policeman was waving at the driver to move on. "Let them stay!" yelled Roger. He pulled something the size of a passport out of his pocket, opened it up, and waved it at the officer. "Oui, monsieur," said the policeman, and motioned to Dr. Duclos to remain where he was. Nicole opened the front door of the car and handed little Ari Paul to Françoise. "Here, Ari's already gone through security, and they won't let me take the baby. If something should happen to me, remember, you're taking care of him. Don't worry, we'll be right here, and we'll keep praying." "Hurry," demanded Roger. "His plane is about to board." Nicole followed him inside, half running to keep up with his long stride. There was a lengthy line of passengers at passport control. Roger led her up to a dark-haired man in casual clothes who was standing to one side, searching the faces of each person while seemingly not looking at anyone. "Here she is," said Roger breathlessly, motioning toward Nicole. Then he turned and disappeared. The blank expression on the man's face didn't change as he instantly looked her up and down and then asked for her purse. That expert search quickly completed, he said in a thick Israeli accent, "We'll give you 5 minutes with him. Follow me." The Israeli agent led Nicole quickly back down the escalator, then hurriedly through the crowd on the ground floor. They came to a lone policeman and another Israeli plainclothesman guarding a short passageway that contained an escalator that was off-limits to passengers. Without showing any identification and with a scarcely perceptible nod, her guide was waved through. "This bypasses the normal security and passport checks," he explained in what appeared to be an attempt at pleasantry. The top of the escalator was guarded by another policeman. Nicole could see that she was now in a holding area filled with passengers who had cleared security, passport, and personal baggage checks and were waiting for their planes to be announced. "Over there," said her guide tersely and motioned across the room. Then she saw him. Ari was looking out a window, his back to her. Dejection and a great weariness were reflected in his sagging frame. For the first time, she perceived him as a man in his 47th year. He had always acted and looked so much younger than that, but at last his age seemed to have caught up with him. Nicole turned with a questioning look to the man who had brought her. He nodded again in Ari's direction, then lit up a cigarette and leaned against a wall in watchful attention. Nicole walked up behind Ari and laid a hand gently on his shoulder. He turned around slowly. "Nicky, how did you get in here?" Instead of reaching out to touch her, he seemed to recoil. "I just had to say goodbye. I brought your son, but they wouldn't let me bring him in here." For a moment, Ari looked genuinely disappointed. Then he steeled himself again. Something wasn't right. His cheeks were flushed, but his eyes were devoid of life, his expression wooden. "Are they treating you well?" she asked anxiously. "Oh, sure, I'm fine, but they wouldn't let me stay in France." "You didn't expect they would, did you?" A dejected look and a shrug were his only answer. Nicole opened her purse, pulled out a folded piece of paper, and handed it to him. Here's my address. Will you write to me?" There was a long pause before Ari replied, "I hadn't planned to. It's best for us to forget each other." "And your son, will he never know his father?" She saw tears well up in his eyes as he reached out and took the piece of paper, then quickly looked away. "There's something I have to tell you, Ari," she continued, looking at her watch and hurrying on. "I had a dream last night, and I wouldn't mention it, but it was so vivid, so real." He still seemed remote, preoccupied. "Are you listening?" she asked. He nodded. "You were on the other side of a deep gorge, calling to me. I was in a beautiful place, peaceful, protected. Somehow I thought it was Jerusalem, and I'd gotten there ahead of you. It's crazy, but when I woke up, I heard myself saying, 'I'll be in Jerusalem before you.' I kept repeating it, and then fell asleep again, feeling so secure." Ari turned and looked at her intently. The listlessness was gone, and he was now listening with deep interest. "That's not all. I dreamed the same thing again, but this time I saw flames and smoke behind you and heard loud explosions, like bombs or shooting. It was getting closer. I knew you were in terrible danger. You were crying out for someone to help you. Then the strangest thing happened. Out of nowhere appeared a man standing on the edge of the cliff in front of me. He bent over, leaned far out to bridge the gorge, and you ran quickly across his back and into my arms. Nicky! Nicky! Not more Messiah madness, not in these few moments. It was so real," she persisted breathlessly, "like it was actually happening. He put his arms around both of us, and I noticed the wounds. Oh, Ari," Nicole finished helplessly. Ari's face flushed. "Please, darling, not now. Maybe our last meeting, and this is all you have to say? Just leave it, Nicky." "Ari, I had to tell you." The words came in a sob. "I just know it means something important, for both of us." The tension between them was broken by the firm voice of the Israeli security agent addressing Nicole. "You'll have to come with me now." Ari's expression softened. He reached out to touch Nicole's arm. "I'm sorry," he said. "I will write. And maybe you and our son can come to Israel someday?" At that moment, the sharp staccato of automatic gunfire erupted from the floor below, bringing the buzz of conversation in the room to a deathly silence. Out of the corner of her eye, Nicole saw the policeman at the top of the side escalator that she and the security man had used whirl around and aim his gun downward. In the same instant, he was lifted off his feet and hurled backward by the force of heavy slugs slamming into his body. The scene before them metamorphosed into the agonizing slow motion of a nightmare. The gendarme seemed to hang suspended in air, a red stain spreading over his uniform before he came crashing to the floor. "Down!" yelled the Israeli security man, motioning toward the floor. Like a coiled spring suddenly released, he leaped over a row of chairs and sprinted to one side of the escalator, pulling a revolver from a holster concealed under his loose jacket as he ran. "My baby!" screamed Nicole. Ari grabbed Nicole to pull her down to safety as 4 masked men exploded from the top of the escalator into the waiting room, spraying death from their submachine guns. Nicole was hit twice in the back, one bullet severing her spine and the other lodging in her heart, killing her instantly. Her body, which had shielded Ari, was thrown against him by the impact of the bullets, knocking him to the floor. Pandemonium reigned. The screams seemed almost to drown out the gunfire. Ari saw 5 civilians standing nearby go down in rapid succession before he hit the floor. There he lay, Nicole on top of him, his arms around her. "Nicky, I'm sorry. Nicky," he heard himself say. The shooting stopped as abruptly as it had begun. Ari rolled Nicole's lifeless form gently over onto the floor, raised his head cautiously, and peered around. It took him a few moments to believe the unbelievable, that the attackers had been dealt such a swift defeat. With incredibly fine-honed precision, the 3 Israeli security guards who had been present had shot and killed 3 of the masked men and had taken the other badly wounded attacker captive. Within a matter of seconds, it was all over. His shirt and pants stained with Nicole's blood, Ari stood uncertainly to his feet and stared in shock at her dead body and the chaos around him. My God, Nicky's dead! He seemed to consciously realize it for the first time. The stunning impact of death's finality and hopelessness staggered him. She was gone, and he couldn't bring her back. Along with the futile grief that constricted his chest and throat, a surging fury rose within him. What vile creatures would make such an attack upon innocent and helpless civilians? Feeling strangely detached from the scene around him, only with difficulty did Ari become aware that the lone surviving terrorist was being led past him, black ski mask still hiding all but his defiant eyes. There had been no need to handcuff this despicable creature. Blood oozed through his shirt and sweater from a badly wounded right shoulder. His shattered left arm hung limply at his side. As the wounded attacker was being dragged past Ari, an Israeli security man contemptuously ripped off his mask. Abdi! The name came involuntarily in a hoarse whisper from Ari's lips. There was no mistaking the identity of the pain-racked but defiant face. For one moment of unspeakable despair that seemed an eternity, Abdul's and Ari's eyes met. In the same instant, Abdul caught sight of Nicole's body, lying face up in a pool of blood at Ari's feet. Nicky! It was a shriek from the depths of hell. Nicky! He tried to pull free from his captors to fall beside her, but they jerked him violently away. As Ari watched in stunned horror, Abdul was dragged from the room, still fighting, still screaming, Nicky! Nicky! All El Al passengers proceed immediately through your gate. The words were being repeated over and over on the loudspeaker, but Ari didn't hear. He had fallen to his knees beside Nicole's crumpled body and was sobbing uncontrollably. Nicky, he pleaded. Nicky, I'm sorry. I'm sorry. Nicky. Ari became aware of a hand on his shoulder and looked up to see the Israeli guard who had accompanied Nicole to this last farewell. He was still holding a smoking .38 revolver. They're boarding. His voice was gentle but firm. You've got to get on board quickly for your own safety. Desperately, Ari pulled away from him. She was my fiancé, and the baby, my son. Where is he? Another security guard stepped up quickly, and the two Israelis yanked Ari to his feet and shoved him toward the gate. I'm sorry, the first one muttered, but the plane must leave with all able-bodied passengers. There could be another attack. My God, man, I can't leave, argued Ari, digging in his heels. I've got to find my son. He's got no one now. I've got to find him. I can't leave. Just then Roger came running up, relieved to see that Ari was unharmed. Get him aboard, he ordered. You scum, Ari turned on Roger, waving an accusing finger. You ordered this attack. You're crazy, shot back Roger. Of course we didn't. Just a coincidence that they happened to attack my flight? Ari's eyes were blazing and his mouth was trembling. They killed Nicky. Roger glanced down at the lifeless form, then quickly back to Ari. His face registered genuine sympathy. I'm sorry, but we're not behind this. You know we've got selfish reasons for wanting you to stay alive. He's asking about a baby, interrupted the Israeli security guard hurriedly. She left it with friends outside. Roger turned to Ari. The baby's safe. That wasn't part of our deal. Now get aboard. We think there's going to be another attack. We've got to get this plane out of here fast. The two Israelis grabbed Ari again and pulled him toward the gate. Here's your bag. Get moving. Nicky! I'm sorry! Nicky! Nicky! The soundless cry deep inside screamed a last agonized farewell.